This year in Australia, we've seen what happens when those who run sport treat their athletes like pawns rather than partners. By not including athletes in decisions that directly impact them, they are taking a big risk, one that athletes appear less and less likely to accept. Most recently, it was the Diamonds at odds with a sponsorship decision taken by Netball Australia. Earlier in the year, it was half the players at the Manly Sea Eagles rugby league team at odds with management over a decision concerning a pride jersey to be worn in women's round. Now we are seeing it play out internationally in one of the core Olympic sports. In fact, the only sport specifically created for the Olympic Games, modern pentathlon. From London, we're joined by three-time Australian Olympian and the modern pentathlon competition manager at the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games, Alex Watson, who has announced he's challenging the president of the international body for the past 3 decades, Germany's Klaus Schurman. Alex, welcome.
Good evening.
Now, modern pentathlon is looking at possibly its last Olympic Games in Paris 2024 because it's not been included on the schedule for LA 2028. Why is that, and what is the drama that is unfolding in your sport?
Well, Tracy, what has happened, unfortunately, is that as a result of unfortunate incidents at Tokyo 2020 in the horse riding, where a German rider horse refused to jump and then she lost a chance to win the gold medal. She was in gold medal position, Annika Slew. Her coach punched the horse and she was removed from the competition and the coach was sent home from the games. But that unfortunate incident was really just the tip of the iceberg in the mismanagement of the sport by the International Federation. And unfortunately, those two Olympic official and the athlete were made the scapegoats for really the failings of the international body.
Let's talk a little bit about those failings, because the IOC President Thomas Bach specifically said change or be changed. Now, those that run the sport have recommended a change. What is it and why don't you like it?
Well, what they've recommended as a result of the situation in Tokyo, which is what they claim is the catalyst for it, is a switch to obstacle racing or ninja warrior as the 5th discipline in modern pentathlon instead of riding, instead of show jumping. And the reason the athletes are in protest about this is that the athletes haven't been consulted. The athletes have not been taken into the debate. They haven't been told the truth by the International Federation. And as it turns out, the fit with obstacle racing is not something that was brought up after Tokyo. It's actually been a business arrangement the UIPM has been working on since 2016 in secret.
So can you give us more detail on that? First of all, the impact on modern pentathletes who suddenly see one of their key disciplines disappearing, replaced by this ninja warrior style racing, but also how you've come to know that this is a business deal that has been bubbling away underneath without actually telling the stakeholders.
Well, firstly, the reason we know is that we have obtained a copy of a draft contract dated April 2016, which was going to be signed between the International Obstacle Racing Federation and the UIPM.
Now, the UIPM, the governing body, has staged a series of test events around the world, and they say the athletes actually like the obstacle racing. But you've done your own survey with athletes and you found the complete opposite. So where does the truth lie in those two alternate truths?
Okay, well, the International Federation, the President Klaus Schurman, would like everyone to believe that the athletes are very excited about losing riding and introducing obstacle racing. But the surveys that have been done independent of the UIPM show in all the surveys that have been done, that over 90% of the current athletes do not want riding replaced. They want better management of the sport, and they want the sport better promoted and better governed. The Athletes Commission of the UIPM is the only athlete body that is saying they want obstacle racing, and it's made up of athletes who are totally under the control of the UIPM. They're not allowed to speak independently, and in fact, when they were shown what the obstacle racing agreement would look like, they were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, so they weren't able to communicate with their own athlete fraternity about what the UIPM were doing. So the whole thing's really been a cover-up, and the athletes have not been brought into the process at all.
Alex, what has the IOC had to say? Because I know that behind the scenes, a letter was sent to the president of the IOC, Thomas Bach. That was signed by 46 Olympic medalists. What did that letter ask for?
That asked for the IOC to intervene and to make the UIPM accountable and open and transparent about the whole process. Because, as I've said, they put out that they were doing an open consultation considering a large number of potential fifth disciplines, but as we know now, the decision had already been made behind closed doors. So the whole consultation process was really just a sham. And this is why the athletes have lost all faith and trust in the leadership of their sport.
Has the International Olympic Committee become involved in any way or responded to your correspondence?
They have, in that they've made it clear that they want the athletes brought into the process and that the athletes must be listened to. And we've made representations to the IOC and particularly Kit McConnell, the sports director, that just isn't happening, and that we would like the IOC to monitor the situation. The IOC have told the UIPM that they're waiting for their proposals on the replacement of riding, but the UIPM had put out originally that the IOC insisted on the removal of riding and wouldn't consider any future for the sport with riding, but that is not correct. The IOC have never demanded the removal of riding. They have asked the UIPM to resolve the problem and come forward with a proposal that is going to meet the IOC criteria for re-inclusion into the Games.
I suppose one of the big problems confronting many sports these days is how do you keep your particular sport relevant? You need to reduce costs because they are trying to bring down costs of hosting Olympic Games. You need to increase revenue and you need to make it entertaining to grow the market. Do you think modern pentathlon as it exists now can do those things, or do you think there might be some merit in changing one of the disciplines, in this case horse riding, to something that has proven to be rather popular, Ninja Warrior style obstacle racing?
Okay, it's a really good argument and a really good issue. And yes, the sport must evolve like all sports, and it must obtain an audience. And it can't and it shouldn't just rely on survival from Olympic revenue. It has to stand on its own feet. And for me, we proved that this could be done really with the staging of the Sydney Games. The events for pentathlon, with the first time for women in the Games, it was a very successful presentation of the sport, and it opened the door for the UIPM to really get the sport functioning more broadly, bigger development plans, more sponsorship, and to become independent just of relying on being an Olympic sport. But unfortunately, they didn't take that forward. They haven't managed it well, and now we're in a situation where we're still totally dependent on staying in the Olympic Games at all costs.
So one of the intriguing factors here, and we know that there is big time politics and pressure applied at these top levels of sports governing bodies, and the Vice President of the UIPM that governs your sport is also an IOC member who has eyes on the presidency of the IOC next time that becomes available, Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr. How are you going to deal with that, given he obviously supports the direction the UIPM is going, and you're saying that they should not, they should reverse that, but he's very senior inside the Olympic movement?
Well, he is very senior and he's a very important figure, and he's an important member of the executive board. What we understand about his position is that he wasn't one of the key people pushing obstacle racing, and he has been quoted himself as saying that this is a gamble, his own words, a big gamble by the UIPM. My position on this is that we would very much like to have his involvement in the sport going forward, but we also believe that we need to examine how the sport is managed, and we need to try and, if you like, model ourselves more on the FEI with their management of equestrian. They're at the top of the rankings for governance with ASOIF, and it continues to be a growing sport globally. Just as an example, the FEI's latest information shows that in 2007 there were 771 international show jumping events, and in 2022 there was 1,770 international show jumping events. So clearly it's not horse riding and equestrian that's the problem. When you examine the FEI's management of their sport, they're obviously doing something very well.
So Alex, why are you the right man to take over the UIPM to govern modern pentathlon?
Well, it's a good question, and I suppose the best answer I can give is that I was asked by the athletes to get involved in what is happening in the sport, and I was looked upon as someone who has produced events in the past that were independent of sports government funding or Olympic funding. They were done by sponsorship, corporate sponsorship, prize money for the athletes, and this really showed a way that the sport could go in the future. So I guess it's a bit of a proven track record of being able to do something for the sport that is forward-thinking and innovative, and the athletes believe that's the way they'd like their sport to be governed.
All of this drama and saga around modern pentathlon has been written about in an intriguing book called Athletes Pressing Charges. Is it the athlete body that you are relying on here, and what sort of support are you knowledgeable that you have confirmed? Because with a lot of these things, we hear people talking, one-on-one, saying, yeah, I support you, and then, they walk out the door and they say to the other colleague, yeah, I support you, and you never really know which way it's going to go until the vote is flushed out. So how confident are you that you have the support of a majority of the athletes, and how influential will they be in the vote?
Well, I believe I have the support of the athletes through the communication I've had with athletes in many countries that the sport is involved in, and also through the Olympic champion and current world champion Jo Chung, who's been the ambassador really for the athletes in this fight with the UIPM. The other side of the equation, of course, is the national federations. They're the power base of the sport. They are supposedly the ones that decide on the future direction of the sport. And I've spoken to many of the national federation executives, presidents. At the moment, the majority of active federations support the retention of riding. but they're all frightened by the UIPM. Some of them have been intimidated and threatened about sanctions or punishment if they don't toe the UIPM line. And this goes to this whole governance issue and the way the sport's being conducted. And we have concrete evidence of the UIPM threatening to take international events away from federations if they don't follow the UIPM line.
I've also heard that Laszlo Fabian and Eva Fjellrup, described as the Federer and Serena of modern pentathlon, are also in your corner. You've got some heavy hitters there, Alex. Do you think next time we speak to you, you'll be the president of modern pentathlon?
Well, there's a long way to go, Tracy. The big thing that's coming up is the Congress, the annual General Assembly of the sport. It's on November 12, so it's only a few weeks away. And what we want to do is ensure that that Congress is open and transparent. The Congress last year was online and it was manipulated by the UIPM. There was a very poor process in terms of democracy, and the UIPM really controlled the agenda through having it online and didn't allow proper debate on the issues. They've gone for an online Congress again this year under a lot of protests from the national federations, and we're going to be really monitoring very carefully how it's conducted to ensure that due process is followed. But I'm put my hat in the ring. I believe we need change. I believe the President Klaus Schaumann has lost the mandate to govern the sport, and we really need to enter a new era if modern pentathlon's to survive and grow.
Alex Watson, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for your time.